Welcome back to another episode, GW. I'm Izzy Angeli, and this is GWeek from home. Coronavirus infections began to increase during the late summer months in Ukraine. Dr. Natalia Stetsik, the chief doctor at the only hospital in Stepnik, says that the town is, quote, catastrophically short of doctors, end quote. Despite the government's efforts to control the outbreak by closing the country's borders in September, October has seen a peak of nearly 5,000 positive tests per day. The total number of cases in Ukraine has doubled in the past month, surpassing 230,000. Many individuals in the gravest of conditions are in their 30s and require expensive medications. Because the entire country is running out of funds to provide such drugs, patients in some areas are buying their own. The government wants to avoid another lockdown, but officials acknowledge that it could become necessary. In fact, the World Health Organization warns that Ukraine could reach 9,000 new infections per day. Dr. Leanna Wen, professor at GW and CNN medical analyst, tweeted on Sunday that she would perform a psychiatric evaluation on President Trump if he were her patient and left the hospital while still sick. She wrote that if he was in unstable condition and had, quote, contagious illnesses and he suddenly left the hospital to go for a car ride that endangers himself and others, I'd call security to restrain him, then perform a psychiatric evaluation to determine his decision-making capacity, end quote. Earlier that day, after being admitted to the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center for treatment, Trump was seen riding in a motorcade for a trip around the hospital. Because Secret Service agents were in the vehicle with him, the car ride was criticized online for putting others at unnecessary risk. GW President LeBlanc announced Friday that all undergraduate and most graduate courses will be conducted online for the spring semester. There will be a 10% reduction in tuition for students who do not live on campus, and commencement will be held virtually, as it was in 2020. With schools attempting to navigate reopening amid the coronavirus pandemic, DC public schools have just made the announcement that kindergarten through 5th grade will be returning in November. Riya Sharma has the story.
Louis Farabee, the chancellor of the DC public school system, announced last Monday that DC public schools will start in-person classes for pre-K and elementary school students as early as November 9th. Classrooms will be limited to 11 students per teacher, and all students and faculty must be wearing PPE at all times. Additionally, care classrooms will be implemented. These rooms have a smaller number of students who will continue to attend virtual classes while being supervised by an adult who is not their teacher. Seats in both of these classrooms are prioritized based on need. Students who are English language learners, experiencing homelessness, receiving special education services, or who are designated as at risk will be given priority for seats in both classrooms. The DC public school system expects most students to return to school, but 20 to 25% of students are expected to continue virtual learning. We sat down with Dr. Castell, a public health professor at the Milken Institute School of Public Health, to discuss DCPS's reopening strategy and some lessons that can be learned from it.
The DC government and the DCPS decision to bring back just a small portion of the students first is a wise decision. There are so many, elements to doing this type of hybrid educational approach that we have not tried before. And so it makes sense that they're going to start with those children that are most in need of coming back to the school setting. They also need to implement, a variety of other measures to try to mitigate and control and prevent the spread of COVID-19. So it makes sense that it's a small group. Ideally, you want the students to be in one area and to have the teachers come to them. The idea behind this and the concepts behind this are all around trying to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So in addition to the things that we all have been doing, like social distancing and hand hygiene and wearing masks to try to reduce the spread, one of the things that school systems can do is to de-densify, so to lower the number of students that they have at one point in time, and also to try to limit the number of interactions and mixing with different cohorts. We will certainly learn if that kind of model works by looking at what's happening in the elementary schools. Worst case scenario, we'll also learn from these situations as to what happens if, for example, either a teacher or a student or somebody, for these children, a parent gets infected with coronavirus, how to try to mitigate the spread in those cohorts, how to work with the health departments to do contact tracing. We'll be able to apply those to GW hopefully next fall.
For GWeek, I'm Riya Sharma.
Thanks, Riya. The former Minneapolis police officer charged in George Floyd's murder, Derek Chauvin, was released in $1 million bond on Wednesday. He was given the choice of posting bail for $1.25 million without conditions or $1 million with conditions. These include mandatory attendance to court appearances, zero contact with Floyd's family members, he cannot be employed in law enforcement, and must surrender all firearms. It is still unclear where or how he acquired the bail money. Chauvin is facing murder and manslaughter charges after kneeling on Floyd's neck and suffocating him to death in May. His attorneys declined to comment to NBC News, while the family's attorneys say the release was a, quote, painful reminder to George Floyd's family that we are still far from achieving justice for George, end quote. Protesters rallied in Minneapolis later that night to express outrage over his release, causing Governor Tim Walz to mobilize hundreds of guardsmen, state troopers, and conservation officers. 51 people were arrested. Well, that's all we have for this week. Don't forget to visit gw-tv.com and follow us on Instagram at GWeek News for more. From our homes to wherever you may be, stay safe, GW.